Okay, let's talk about the characters in An Inspector Calls. In about 10 to 15 minutes, let's try and pack it all in. I think we can do it pretty well. Now, the way that I like to organize it is essentially with Eva Smith right in the middle, because she is at the heart of everything. Okay, so the reason that she's at the heart of everything is, well, because she's the reason that they've all been brought together, the reason the inspector is there. But ironically, she has no lines in the play. She has no part to actually play. And so we're just going to be thinking about the influence that she has on the other characters and vice versa. So we're going to take them one at a time. Let's start with Mr. Burling. Obviously, the link here is quite a simple one. It's just a link of employer employee type relationship. And then we've got Sheila. So I'm just going to take these one at a time before I go into any more detail. With Sheila, we have, of course, I guess, the customer slash client, I guess, and the um, the advisor or assistant. That's their kind of link. So professional and someone linking there. Then, of course, we have Eric, and in this case, it's quite a difficult one to define. Are they lovers? Is it a predator and victim scenario? Depends how you like to define it. Um, then, obviously, we talk about the inspector, and the inspector's role when it comes to Eva Smith is quite simple. Essentially, he is her advocate. Okay, he is her advocate, and she is his responsibility. When it comes to Gerald, it would probably be more fair to say than it did with Eric that they are or were lovers. Okay, but you could equally argue that we have a kind of controller and mistress type role to make it slightly more seedy. And then, of course, finally, we have Mrs. Burling. Sadly, guys, I'm not going to be talking about Edna because she doesn't really have much of a part to play. Mrs. Burling, she is I guess, the boss when it comes to the charity, and Eva is our kind of our victim. Could we call her our what could she be called? Someone who is needy. That's our kind of relationships between each of these characters. But what's kind of quite interesting is the way that they respond to her is going to be different. Okay, so when it comes to Mr. Burling, he is our staunch capitalist, and this is really quite an important one because it means that we're going to have capital is always going to be above the is always going to be above the laborer. Okay, and that's the way that he's going to see it. And so as a result, he's not going to recognize that a strike could ever be a good thing. Okay, so the role of the strike is quite significant here. When it comes to Sheila, on the other hand, Sheila is our kind of she's our future thinker. Okay, and if we think obviously ahead, let's make this an AO3 connection. If we think ahead to 1945 with Labour under Clement Attlee, we end up thinking, oh, actually, this makes a lot more sense because we're now looking at, because she would be, she would be of a, like, I guess, approaching her parents' age by the time that 1945 rolled around. So obviously we've got 1912, so that would be what, 33 years. So she would be in her kind of 50s, so about the age of her parents by the time that that Labour government came in. So she would be the kind of person who would have made that happen. Okay, so this kind of social responsibility idea that she espouses as the play progresses. Obviously, we could talk in a lot more depth about her kind of her arc and the fact that she kind of develops over the course of the play, certainly from a moral perspective. Um, but there's obviously limited time here. Now, when it comes to Eric, we think of him as, a representative of the younger generation, but and he learns as a result of things. However, he is also a criminal. Okay, he commits a crime, kind of commits two quite significant crimes. Obviously, the significantly worse one being the assault of Eva Smith. And so we don't necessarily think of him in the same way that we think of Sheila, and that could be because there's a gender role at play here, because his privilege as a young man with a lot of money and power is obviously going to be greater than Sheila's, and she's kind of more governed by her compassion. And so his freedom to act as he wants to without consequence and just kind of spend his money and have a good time is one of the reasons that he doesn't end up getting the same level of forgiveness, certainly by our modern audience, that Sheila obviously does. Um, Now, the inspector, obviously, we have this classic phrase that students love to use of him being Priestley's mouthpiece, right? Okay, he's representative um, of of Priestley's own kind of socialist views, and it's quite heavy-handed, right? It's quite sort of over the top the way that he asserts this onto the family. Um, then we have, obviously, with his name, Ghoul, and his strange disappearance and reappearance, the suggestion of there being supernatural. Is there something strange going on in terms of the time frame, so temporally? So he's a bit of a mysterious character, but in his job here is to do his duty, as he says, and his responsibility is to Eva Smith, Daisy Renton, and obviously this notion of justice in general. When we think, obviously, next about Mrs. Burling, she is from kind of old money, and those from old money, so her husband's social superior, those from old money are by definition um, conservative. Okay, she wants to maintain things the way that they are. Okay, which means that she is by definition close closed closed-minded. Okay, she will not accept that there is a possibility of learning things from this. Okay, so closed-minded because she's conservative, she wants to preserve things the way that they are, and so as a result she belongs in 1912, not in 1945 when this play is released. Okay, so she belongs here where it's set, but not here where it is released. And then finally, we of course have Gerald. Now, Gerald is quite divisive when it comes to modern audiences because um, those kind of looking at the play in a very kind of synchronous way, i.e., without any anachronism, meaning that they are placing it within its context. Most people reading the play, seeing the play at the time, and most people kind of reading the text when it was first published, would kind of agree that he's the kind of our kind of fairy prince, and he's forgiven by the end. Even the inspector says that he. At least he showed her some affection and kind of made her feel good for a time. So he's very much kind of forgiven, but modern audiences do not like him very much because of his hypocrisy, because of his selfishness, and this idea of him being not quite a dandy. You know, um, I think it says a little too masculine to be a dandy. So not quite a dandy, but very close. Okay, so um, he uses his money and status to get what he wants in this kind of semi-reckless way, which obviously links him, even though he's a very different character in many ways, to Eric in terms of this idea of male privilege, with the that kind of AO3 link to combining gender and class, and so we end up with this character of Gerald, who can very much take advantage of the fact that he has all this money, all this power, all this status, all this reputation, and the fact that he is a man means that he can act basically how he wants to, with his mistreatment of the women in his life, and essentially get away with it, and be forgiven by all the characters on the stage, many people in the audience, but by a modern audience, we start to realize what the truth is. Okay, so 10 minutes, a quick overview of the characters, particularly as they link to the central absent character of Eva Smith, and hopefully that has given you a nice little overview of what to say about these characters in the exam.